I never thought my life would turn into a story like this. Not the kind people listen to late at night. Not the kind filled with silence, betrayal, and choices you never imagined making while carrying a child. But here I am, telling you the truth. I stayed silent about for too long. I trusted him, and I trusted him most when I was at my most vulnerable. When people ask me who my husband was, I still pause, because the man I married and the man I discovered feel like two completely different people. When I met him, he wasn't perfect, but he felt safe. That kind of safe you don't question, the kind that makes you believe the future is already written. He laughed easily, held doors open, listened when I spoke, or at least I thought he did. He used to look at me like I was something precious, like I mattered. And when he asked me to marry him, I didn't hesitate. I said yes, because I believed love was supposed to feel exactly like that. The first years of marriage weren't dramatic. No screaming fights, no slammed doors, just routine, comfort, plans. We talked about kids late at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. He wanted a son. I didn't care. I just wanted a healthy baby. He'd smile and say, "Whenever you're ready." I thought that meant together. The day I found out I was pregnant, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the test. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. I sat on the bathroom floor and cried, not from fear, but from overwhelming joy. I remember whispering, "We did it." When I told him, his reaction was calm, not cold, not angry, just quieter than I expected. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, said, "This changes everything." At the time, I thought he meant it in a good way. Now I know he was right, just not for the reasons I believed. Pregnancy changes you. Your body, your sleep, your emotions. Everything feels closer to the surface. I was exhausted all the time. Sensitive. Overthinking things I normally wouldn't. And he started changing too. Subtle at first. He stayed longer at work, checked his phone more often, laughed at messages he didn't explain. When I asked, he'd say, "Just work stuff." I wanted to be the understanding wife, the calm, supportive partner. So I ignored the tight feeling in my chest. I told myself, "You're hormonal, you're imagining things." At night, I'd lie awake while he slept beside me, one hand on my stomach, feeling the baby move. And sometimes, in the quiet, a thought would creep in, soft but persistent. What if something is wrong? I pushed it away every time, because admitting doubt felt like betraying my own marriage. He stopped touching my belly as much. When he did, it felt forced, like a gesture instead of a connection. Still, he'd say the right things. "You look beautiful. You're doing great. I've got you." Words are powerful. They make you doubt your instincts. There was one night I remember clearly. I was sitting on the couch, feet swollen, back aching, watching TV while he showered. His phone buzzed on the table. Once, then again. I didn't look. I told myself trust mattered more than curiosity. But something shifted inside me that night. Not fear. Awareness. Pregnancy is supposed to be a time when you feel protected. Instead, I felt alone even when he was in the room. And still, I trusted him. Because love teaches you to believe before it teaches you to see. Pregnancy has a way of sharpening your senses. Not in a dramatic movie-like way, but in quiet moments, when something feels off. I started noticing how often he wasn't really there. He'd sit next to me on the couch, scrolling through his phone, smiling at the screen. When I asked what was funny, he'd tilt it away and say, "Nothing, just a meme." I laughed along, but inside a question formed and refused to leave. He began taking calls outside. At first I told myself it was work. Then I realized the calls always happened late, always when I was tired, always when I wouldn't ask questions. One night, I heard him whisper. Not loudly, just enough. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Soft, careful, intimate. The kind of voice he used to reserve for me. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed afterward, heart racing, hands cold. When he came back inside, I pretended to be asleep. He lay down beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and pulled it back quickly, as if he'd remembered something, or someone. My body was changing every day. Stretch marks, swollen ankles, sleepless nights. I needed reassurance. Instead, I got distance. He stopped asking about appointments, stopped coming with me. When I showed him ultrasound photos, he smiled, but his eyes didn't linger. It felt like he was already somewhere else. A friend noticed before I did. We were having coffee, and she asked casually, "Is everything okay with you two?" I shrugged. "Just pregnancy stuff." She hesitated, then said, "He just seems distracted." I defended him immediately. "He's stressed. Work's been crazy." She nodded. But her silence said more than her words. That night, I cried in the shower. Not because I knew something was wrong, but because I felt like I was losing him and didn't know why. I pressed my hands to my stomach and whispered, "I'll protect you." I didn't realize yet that I was the one who needed protection. The dreams started soon after. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, images I couldn't explain lingering in my mind, him laughing with someone else, doors closing in my face, me calling his name, and him not turning around. I told myself dreams meant nothing, but my body was reacting before my mind was ready to accept the truth. One afternoon, he came home late, later than usual. When I asked where he'd been, he hesitated, just for a second. "Traffic," he said. He didn't meet my eyes. That second stayed with me longer than it should have. The phone became his shadow. Bathroom, shower, even to bed. One night I reached for it by accident, thinking it was mine. He grabbed it instantly. "Careful," he said, smiling. But his grip was tight. Too tight. I started keeping track without realizing it. Times, patterns, excuses. I hated myself for it. I didn't want to be that woman. The suspicious one. The jealous one. The pregnant wife who overreacts. So I did what I was best at. I stayed quiet. There was a moment, just one, when I almost confronted him. I was standing in the doorway, words forming in my throat. Is there someone else? But fear stopped me. Fear of the answer. Fear of being wrong. Fear of breaking the fragile version of peace we still had. So I swallowed the question and smiled. I didn't know then that silence was exactly what he needed, because while I was choosing trust, he was choosing secrecy. And every day, I waited. The truth was getting closer. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you notice every sound. The ticking clock. The hum of the refrigerator. His breathing beside me. I couldn't sleep. The baby was restless, rolling gently inside me, as if sensing my unease. He had fallen asleep quickly, turning his back to me without a word. That alone hurt more than it should have. Then his phone vibrated. Once. Soft. Short. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another vibration. This time longer. The phone was on the nightstand, screen down. Close enough for me to reach. Too close. My heart started pounding so loudly I was afraid it would wake him. I told myself to ignore it. It's probably nothing. You're tired. You're imagining things. But then it vibrated again. And again. No one texts that much at midnight unless it matters. I slowly turned onto my side. He didn't stir. His hand twitched slightly, like his body knew something his mind didn't. The phone lit up just enough for me to see a name. Not a contact. Just a first name. Short, feminine. My stomach dropped. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I stared at it, as if it might explain itself. As if it might disappear if I refused to acknowledge it. The screen went dark. Silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. I lay there for what felt like hours. My mind racing. Who was she? How long? Did he love her? I pressed my hand against my belly, trying to ground myself, trying not to cry. I promised myself something that night. Tomorrow I'll ask. Tomorrow I won't be afraid. But tomorrow never comes the way you imagine. The next morning he was unusually attentive. Too attentive. He made breakfast, asked how I slept, kissed my cheek longer than usual. Guilt has a way of making people generous. I almost believed him again. Days passed, then weeks, and nothing happened. No confession, no explanation, just the same patterns. Late nights, hidden phone, distant eyes. The unanswered questions sat between us, growing heavier by the day. I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. A new cologne. Clothes changed the moment he got home. Showers taken immediately. Once I found a receipt in his pocket. Dinner for 2. On a night he told me he was working late. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. When I showed it to him, he laughed. "Client dinner?" he said easily. I wanted to believe him. So I did. That was the night I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake, listening to his breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of someone else, wondering if our child meant anything to him anymore. One afternoon I went to a prenatal appointment alone. Again. The doctor smiled, asked if my husband would be joining us next time. I shook my head. He's busy. The word tasted bitter. Busy choosing someone else. I sat in my car afterward and cried harder than I had in months. Not because I had proof, but because deep down I already knew. And knowing without confronting was slowly breaking me. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't accuse. If he was hiding something, I would let him. And I would watch. Because the truth has a way of revealing itself when you stop chasing it. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. No dramatic storm, no raised voices, no warning. Just a moment so simple it almost slipped by unnoticed. He asked me to check his email. That alone felt strange. He stood in the doorway, already dressed to leave, keys in his hand, jacket over his arm. "Can you see if my flight confirmation came in?" he said casually. "My phone's in the car." I hesitated. Not long enough for him to notice, but long enough for my heart to skip. Then I nodded. Sure. The laptop was already open. I sat at the table, one hand on my stomach, the other on the mouse. I typed his password. It worked. That felt like permission. The inbox loaded. At first, everything looked normal. Work emails, spam, receipts. Then I saw it. A subject line that didn't belong. Not work, not family, just a name. Her name. My chest tightened. I told myself not to click it. You're looking for a flight email. Don't cross a line you can't uncross. But my hand moved anyway. Some truths don't wait for consent. The email opened. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. But it destroyed everything. I miss you already. Last night meant more than you think. When can I see you again? There was a heart at the end. I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I scrolled. There were more. Weeks of messages, plans, jokes, intimacy, a life I wasn't part of. One message stood out. "I know she's pregnant, but I feel like I'm the one you really choose." I pressed my hand to my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Time slowed. I thought of our baby, of the promises he made, of every moment I defended him. And suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the phone, the late nights. It wasn't stress. It was her. I didn't cry. Not yet. Shock has a way of freezing tears. Instead, I closed the laptop. Carefully. Quietly. Like nothing had happened. When he came back inside, he smiled. "Anything come in?" I looked at him and saw a stranger. "No," I said calmly. "Nothing yet." That night I lay awake again, but this time there was no confusion. Only clarity. He was cheating on me while I carried his child, and he thought I didn't know. I realized something then. Confrontation would give him control. Denial, gaslighting, excuses. I didn't want answers. I wanted power. So I did something unexpected. I stayed silent. I cooked. I smiled. I asked about his day. I watched him lie to my face with terrifying ease. And I let him. Because the moment you know the truth and the other person doesn't know you know, that's when everything changes. Something inside me shut down that night. Not my heart, but my fear. I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't confront him. I didn't even shake. I felt empty. And in that emptiness, I found clarity. The next morning I woke up before him. The house was quiet. The sun barely rising. I made coffee and sat at the table, staring at nothing. My hand rested on my belly, feeling slow, steady movement. Life. In the middle of betrayal, life was still growing inside me, and that changed everything. I whispered, "I won't let this break us. Not me. Us." From that moment on, this wasn't about my marriage anymore. It was about protection. I started paying attention differently. Not emotionally. Logically. I noticed patterns instead of feelings. What days he left early. What excuses he reused. How often her name appeared in emails. I didn't save screenshots. I memorized. Because I didn't want to feel like a victim collecting proof. I wanted to feel like someone in control. I smiled more. Not because I was happy, but because I was invisible. People don't suspect women who smile, especially pregnant women, especially ones who look tired but still ask how you are. He started relaxing, letting his guard down. That's the thing about secrets. They get heavier the longer you carry them. Eventually, people want relief. He talked more, complained more. He told me how stressed he was. I listened. I nodded. I learned. One evening, he said something that confirmed everything. "I'm thinking of taking a short trip next month," he said casually. "Work-related?" I looked at him and smiled. "That's fine," I said. "Whatever you need." He didn't expect that. I saw it in his eyes. That night, after he fell asleep, I did something for the first time. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, and I searched for a lawyer. It felt surreal, like I was planning someone else's life. But every page I read, every article about custody, every quiet note I made, I felt stronger, prepared. The lawyer's office was calm, neutral, no judgment in her eyes. She didn't ask why right away. She asked when. "When did you find out?" I answered honestly. "A few weeks ago." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been carrying this alone?" I nodded. She paused, then said softly, "You're stronger than you think." I didn't feel strong. I felt focused. There's a difference. I started setting things aside. Important documents, financial records, birth plans. I made copies. I didn't hide them. I placed them where he never looked. Underestimating someone is the easiest mistake to make. At home, nothing changed. Dinner at the same time. Small talk. Routine. But something had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. One night, he reached for my hand, held it longer than usual. "I love you," he said. I believed that he believed it. People can love you and still destroy you. I looked at him and said nothing, because I knew something he didn't. The version of me who trusted blindly was gone, and the woman sitting across from him was already preparing to leave. He changed again, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. He watched me more closely, paid attention to my reactions, listened for tone instead of words. It was subtle, but guilt makes people paranoid. One evening he asked, "Are you okay?" The question felt heavier than it sounded. I looked up from my plate, smiled. "Just tired," I said. "Pregnancy?" He nodded. Too quickly. He started offering his phone more. "Can you check the weather? Can you answer that for me?" Little tests. I declined politely every time. "No, it's fine." I didn't need proof anymore. I already had the truth. One night he brought flowers home. No reason, no occasion, just guilt wrapped in romance. I thanked him, put them in water, watched his shoulders relax. He thought he had fixed something, but cracks don't heal when you decorate them. They spread. He became restless, sleepless. I could feel it beside me in bed. The way he turned, the way he sighed. One night, he said quietly, "You've been distant." I almost laughed, but instead I said, "I'm just trying to be strong." That answer confused him. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't reassurance. It was truth. He started asking about the baby more. Suddenly interested. Suddenly present. Guilt again. I answered politely. But something else had changed. I was no longer emotionally available. And he felt it. There was a moment I'll never forget. We were in the kitchen. He stood behind me, his hands resting lightly on my hips, It used to feel comforting. This time it felt foreign. "You still love me, right?" he asked. The question wasn't romantic. It was desperate. I took a breath. "I care about the family we're building," I said carefully. He pulled his hands away. From that day on, he started making mistakes. Small ones. Careless ones. A name mentioned too casually. A story that didn't align. Once he forgot to delete a message notification. I saw the preview, a heart emoji, a timestamp from minutes earlier. He noticed my eyes linger. Too long. That night he confronted me. Not about her, about me. "You've been different," he said. Quiet. Observant. I met his gaze. "People change," I replied. He searched my face, trying to find himself reflected there. He didn't. I realized something important then. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of being exposed. Of consequences. Of the version of himself he couldn't control. And that's when I knew. The moment was coming. The moment he'd realized the silence he depended on was no longer protecting him. Because while he was watching me, I was waiting. The night it finally happened didn't feel dramatic. No storm outside, no shouting, no warning signs. Just dinner on the table. The TV murmuring in the background. A life pretending to be intact. I cooked his favorite meal. Not out of love, out of closure. There's something powerful about choosing your last normal moment. He noticed the effort. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, smiling. "I wanted to," I replied. And for the first time in weeks, that was true. We ate quietly. He talked about work, about plans, about the future. A future he assumed still included me. I listened. Every word felt surreal, because I knew this was the last time I'd hear him speak so freely. After dinner, we sat on the couch. He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I let him feel the calm he hadn't earned. "You've been really strong lately," he said. "I don't know how you do it." I looked at him. "I learned faster than I wanted to," I answered. He frowned slightly, but didn't press. The baby kicked. Hard. I placed his hand on my stomach. He smiled, genuinely this time. And for a split second, I wondered if I should stop, if I should give him one more chance. But then I remembered the emails, the lies, the way he slept peacefully while I cried silently beside him, and the doubt disappeared. I turned to him, my voice steady. "There's something we need to talk about." His body stiffened instantly. Not surprise. Recognition. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say her name. I simply said, "I know." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Thick. Unavoidable. He swallowed. "I don't know what you think you know." I raised my hand. "Don't," I said softly. "That won't work." His face changed. The confident mask cracked. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. I nodded. "I believe that," I said. He looked relieved. Then I continued. "But you still did." He reached for me. I stood up. "I didn't say this to argue," I said calmly. "I said it because you deserve to know that I won't be staying." The panic in his eyes was immediate. "What are you talking about? You're pregnant. We're a family." I met his gaze. Families don't lie like this. He tried everything after that. Apologies, excuses, tears. He blamed stress, fear, timing. He said it meant nothing. That's when I looked at him and said the sentence that finally broke him. "If it meant nothing," I said, "it wouldn't have cost you everything." He collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. I stood there, calm, not angry, free. That night I slept in the guest room. For the first time in months, I slept without fear, without questions, without hoping. The next morning I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. Because I wasn't running. I was choosing. The morning I left, the house felt unfamiliar. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I packed quietly, clothes folded with intention, documents placed carefully in my bag. I moved slowly, aware of every step, every breath. He stood in the doorway, watching, not stopping me, not helping, just realizing, too late, that control had slipped through his fingers. "I can fix this," he said finally. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I zipped the bag. Then I turned to him. "This isn't something you fix," I said. "It's something you live with." He asked where I was going. I didn't tell him. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because my safety, my peace, and my child's future were no longer his concern. The drive away was quiet. No music, no tears. Just the steady sound of the road and the gentle movement inside my belly. I placed a hand there and whispered, "We're okay." And for the first time, I believed it. The weeks that followed were hard. Not because I missed him, but because healing isn't instant. There were nights I questioned myself, moments I felt weak, but every time doubt crept in, I remembered the woman I had been, silent, waiting, breaking quietly, and I chose not to go back. He tried reaching out. Messages, apologies, promises. I read none of them. Some conversations don't deserve replies. The legal process was calm, structured, unemotional. Facts instead of feelings. He looked shocked when he realized how prepared I was. That I had thought ahead. That I had chosen dignity over chaos. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror. My body had changed. My life had changed. But my eyes looked stronger. Not hardened. Clear. People asked how I was doing. I didn't tell them everything. I just said, "I'm choosing peace." And that was the truth. Motherhood arrived quietly. Not with fear, but with purpose. I didn't need a perfect family. I needed an honest one. Sometimes I think about him, not with anger, but with distance. He taught me something important. That trust is powerful, but intuition is wiser. I trusted him during my pregnancy, and that was my biggest mistake. But walking away, that was my greatest strength. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels wrong, listen. Because silence doesn't protect love. Truth does.
Se essa história te tocou, deixe um comentário.